Over the next few weeks, we'll be building a loosely flamenco-style classical acoustic guitar in SolidWorks and rendering it using Modo. But unlike a lot of the tutorials on CAD Junkie, this one is going to be a fully functional, working model, ready to be machined, assembled, and, if we're extraordinarily lucky, played. Having never built a guitar myself, however, I've had to do a lot of research on the subject just to get the dimensions right. So as you can see, I have already used SolidWorks to build a basic reference model already, mainly just to familiarize myself with the dimensions and proportions of my perfect guitar from an acoustic and ergonomic standpoint. The next step is to think of it from an industrial design standpoint, so that hopefully it will look as good as it feels and sounds. Now, designing a musical instrument, to me, is a truly poetic idea. We're creating a highly evolved scientific instrument with the sole purpose of abstract human expression. One of my great life passions is studying the intersection of art and engineering, and the design of musical instruments, or organology, if you want to sound smart, is in my mind the perfect example of science and engineering in the service of art. But enough lecturing. Now that I've familiarized myself with the dimensions and constraints on me as I design, it's time to explore the visual possibilities available to us. And quite frankly, there is no faster way to do that than with good old-fashioned sketching. But since I have a Wacom tablet, I'll be doing that sketching using alias SketchBookDesigner 2012. You could use Sketchbook Pro or Illustrator or Photoshop if you prefer. So in SolidWorks, I'm going to hit the spacebar and go to the front view. Then I'll head up to File, Save As, and a lot of folks don't know you can do a Save As JPEG to save this out as a flat file. Just click on Options, set the DPI to something reasonable, and I'm going to say 300. Then you can save that file wherever you like. Now over in Sketchbook Designer, I'm going to use File, Import, Image, and then locate that file that I just saved. The default Sketchbook Designer interface is much too cluttered for my taste, so I like to hide it all by hitting Alt-1 on the keyboard for Hide All UI Elements. And then with the UI hidden, I can always bring it back temporarily by holding the W key on the keyboard. Now by default, Sketchbook Designer files have 3 layers: a Canvas layer, a Paint 1 layer, and a Vector 1 layer. Importing our image has created a 4th layer on top of that stack. So first, let's drag the little page icon on the right to move the image layer below the Paint 1 layer. Then click the black arrow to the left of that layer to reveal its properties. Drag the opacity down to about 20% or until the details of the guitar are just barely visible. Now click the title of the Paint 1 layer and drag it diagonally up and to the right to delete it. Select the Vector 1 layer and click the black arrow to select its properties. Check the Symmetry box in those properties, and drag that Symmetry widget to the center of the guitar. It doesn't matter where it is vertically, just the horizontal position matters. Select the Pencil tool and make sure that the freehand sketch curve is selected. Now when you use the pencil on a vector layer, it works exactly as you might expect a pencil tool to work. Pressure sensitivity is available, and the line is actually quite responsive to very minute movements. You'll also notice that Symmetry mode is automatically mirroring everything we do. But the real power of vector layers is that the curves can be edited after they've been drawn. For example, after drawing a curve, an icon appears somewhere nearby. To interactively smooth the curve, just drag that outer circle. The further you drag, the smoother that curve gets. To snap to an implicit geometrical shape, click the icon in the center of that little widget. If the line is roughly linear, it becomes a line. If it's roughly elliptical, it becomes an ellipse, and if it's nearly circular, Sketchbook will interpret it to be a circle. This is very cool stuff. To adjust the curve manually, click on the blue selection icon and click a curve. Then you can drag its endpoints to move them. You can drag somewhere near an endpoint to move the entire curve at once, or click anywhere along the curve to define an interpolation point and deform the curve using that point. You can add as many of those points as you want. You can also use the red curve deformation tools at the top to modify those curves. And if a curve looks too heavy or too light, you can also select it and adjust its type, size, and intensity using the Tool Properties palette. To draw straight lines, ellipses, or circles, you can use the appropriate subtools under the pencil. You can always adjust the curves as you draw them by dragging their handles on the fly. When two curves intersect, you can use the red Select Curve Segment tool, and then box select the parts that you want to get rid of. Then hit Delete. I like to draw all of my most basic geometry on my single vector layer before I actually start working through any design ideas. Once I've drawn the guitar's main shapes, I can click and hold on the title of a layer, and then drag to the right to duplicate that layer. Then I can click the eyeball to the left of the original layer to hide it, and now we can safely experiment with different design ideas without worrying about losing all of that work. As you're working, there may be radially symmetric patterns you'd like to add, like patterns around the sound hole, for example. So click and hold on the title of the top layer, and then drag left to add a new vector layer. Expand the layer properties, check the symmetry box, and drag the symmetry widget to the center of the sound hole, and now drag that number of array instances all the way around the widget to 16, or whatever number you might want. And now, when you use that pencil tool to draw to your little heart's content, it's going to duplicate everything you do 16 times all the way around that sound hole. Very, very cool stuff. Now keep adding layers as needed, but try not to overdo it. Trust me, it can be a big temptation to want to keep all of your layers nice and editable and separate, but ultimately, I found that you can massively jack up your workflow mojo by using way too many layers. Every so often, I make it a point to merge my line work layers down to a single paint layer if possible. Paint layers are lighter and faster than vector layers, plus they're just darned easy to work with. But you can stick to vector layers as long as you want to. But if you do flatten it to a paint layer, and you want to get rid of something, you can just use the eraser tool. Easy. If the eraser brush is the wrong size, hold the B key and drag in the viewport to dynamically change its size. In terms of layers, my end goal is usually to have no more than 2 or 3 layers, usually one for line work and one for all of my colored fills, airbrushing, etc., and then I'll add another layer or two if I want to add special graphics and stuff like that.